Welcome to another episode of Zero Bips. This is episode 6. George, how's it going? How's everything been with you?
Everything's great, man. As you can see, it's a big week for golf. Big week for our industry. To get distracted, as I was saying before. So yeah, Masters week, and yeah, I was just glad I could step off the course and give you some of my time.
I actually thought when you just joined the call that you walked off the range and just showed up because you were fully suited out and you have the golf clubs in the back. So I assumed you were just hitting a couple balls from your backyard before you jumped on.
Like I can swing a club and connect with a ball sometimes, but like I'm not a golfer. But I have a set of clubs and a little bit of backstory about it. They were a gift from my father-in-law, and for me, like he big golfer. So that was the like a very validating sign from like a man that like he gave me the nod of approval. So yeah, so I got into golfing because of him, and but I don't really actively golf, but keep the Masters on in the background like everybody else. It's a great distraction to it's really the only thing happening in sports right now. It's like the beginning of baseball, NBA stinks, there's no football. So, it's just, we got the Masters.
And there's so much money, institutional money that just goes into the Masters. It's wild.
Yeah, I know.
Admittedly, I don't golf. I haven't actually had a chance to golf. I will maybe when we, do so much better, and have some more time, but we've been heads down busy building. So that's my excuse. I don't know how valid it is, but, uh,
Yeah.
realistically, I guess I'll get out there at some point and try it out. But, you know,
Yeah. When I was like just watching upstairs, the sponsors, and you think about the sponsorship of this tournament versus like what the sponsors are paying and then what we'll pay to sponsor a conference, you're like, man, Mercedes is writing a check,
of course.
obviously. But yeah, it's we're just lucky, like we have our sponsors. It's and it keeps us going here at zero basis points. There you go. So this one brought to you by ARQA
Yeah. No,
for
well,
sure.
that's awesome. Well, speaking of sports, big week. It's been a pretty big week with the tariffs. There's another 90-day pause for the tariffs, which made the markets go wild. There's another big week coming for tokenization with all the roundtables that the SEC is now holding. Paul Atkins got confirmed for the head of the SEC as well. So a lot of news. I mean, what are you hearing from the ground for some of the advisors, from some of the people in your network?
When I've been connecting with, my network just seems to be thinking that like they needed a drink all week long.
Yeah.
That's the vibe from my, from the people in wealth management. Like this is too much. This isn't healthy, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it swings like that aren't healthy, and to something, I said last week, maybe obnoxiously, but if you can't take the heat, you got to get out of the kitchen. It's up and it down, and that's the only way to be anyway. I mean, it's nice to be steady. But yeah, this is a wild ride, and it's not gonna get unwild anytime soon. So
Yeah, I
we're
think
going.
I think some of the points you made last week about just toughen it out. This isn't the first time this has happened. Stay healthy. Try to just show up every day and do what you're doing, and really not don't pay attention, but just don't let it emotionally get to you. And I think that's what it's been because we had the tariffs, we had the drop, we had him pause it, we had the upswing, and people were like, "Oh, we knew it." Now, who knows what's going to happen after 90 days again, right? Obviously, China is the only one that he kept a larger tariff on, so we'll see if that brings anything to the negotiating table. But on the side of the cryptos, it's been kind of crazy. So one of the things I follow pretty heavily is on the utility side for some of these applications of cryptocurrencies and blockchains. And I can tell you this, the roundtable that they held recently was so much more was focused on tokenization than prior. And I think that's a really interesting angle that they're going at it. We called this out early on in one of our episodes when we talked about crypto of how aside from just the value of like blockchain being the standard, et cetera, for Bitcoin specifically, how utility across the other coins applies to real world assets and tokenization. And now Larry Fink's coming out and he's talking about it as well after that roundtable. So just the people who track the speech and how often it was dropped in these meetings know that something is coming, but it's going to be very interesting whether it's going to be a US denominated blockchain cryptocurrency like RLUSD, which is the Ripple version, or USDT. Some of these things are gonna, I think, shake up the markets quite a bit.
Yeah, like I understand, and I like you, as I said before, taking the lead on the crypto because you understand the utility more. But like I understand, to me, what like tokenization of crypto means is, you know, it's available to me in a fraction of the form that I can buy whenever I want it, as easily as I can buy any other cryptocurrency, which is really easy. So that's what tokens mean. It's almost like taking what is very upstream now. It's not even that upstream. It's just it's well, actually it is upstream. It's to open a brokerage account and buy stuff is a pain. So if you bring that downstream and tokenize it, and so is the utility everything in between that process?
Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, I think here's the interesting part of it, and this is some relevance because Schwab just announced recently that they're, allowing folks to invest in alts who have assets of 5 million or more. When you think about where tokenization is headed, like, you don't really need that even in place, or a restriction in place for that, because what happens with the utility aspect is we're going from an age of brokerage accounts and bank accounts to these blockchain and wallet addresses, where I can take a real world asset, and that's, if you've seen that term be thrown around, RWA for short, real world asset, like a home, an art piece, a vehicle, or something that's tangible, or even you can take an investment in the traditional private equity asset class and then tokenize it. And what that would mean is you don't have to have a fraction of it if you don't want to, but it allows you, the utility is that you could actually splice that investment into pieces and sell off an interest. And realistically, someone would just hold it in their wallet if they wanted to invest in,
Right,
1 million of a $5 million deal or something like that, if they wanted to
right,
break it apart, which
right.
traditionally wasn't done before.
Yeah, that's a awesome explanation.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be super interesting. I think if BlackRock's looking at it, we should all be looking at it as well, because things will change very quickly, just giving their exposure. So I think it's going to be an interesting next couple of months, or even in the term of Trump, because he's very pro crypto. It seems like he's bringing on people who are super pro crypto, and it might be a very wild take we have pretty soon. So
Yeah, and you know what? Something now that our audience has really grown. Something we said on the earlier episodes is that an advisor should uh, have a Coinbase account on their iPhone or Android. They should have a Phantom, Phantom account, and follow Phantom and follow these applications on X because they're really talking about cool stuff. But understand what it means to, connect your bank account to your Coinbase account to a Coinbase wallet, Coinbase account to Phantom, so that you can quickly, because what happens is, well, the way that a lot of people respond is when you get excited about investment, and that's no way to invest. So I don't even want to say that. But you should really understand what I learned about tokenization. It was by doing just that. It was like, oh, I thought it's easy to set up a Coinbase account and buy some Bitcoin. But then when you hear all this stuff about uh, Bartcoin and like these other coins that just you're like, how do I get some of this? And as much of a joke as that is, it's been like one of the best performers to like
yeah.
hold. So it's why I bring in, like, if you read about predictions from the future, which I read, it was always advised that that's like a good hold because it can only go up. And so just a funny one, but I think of all the things that you're going to spend your time doing on the weekend, and if it's going to be watching some of the Masters like everybody else, well, it's a crummy day in the Northeast. If I was in Southern California like you, maybe I would take a walk, but I'm not going to do that today here. But set up that crypto account and with $20, move it over to Phantom, and I don't know, maybe today isn't by the day to buy some meme coins, but I think it's important to do that because that's what I mean by tokenization. Haik's talking about, leveraging the utility of these networks that we call Sol and Bitcoin, and just understand how they work because that's how everybody that's under 40 sees this stuff moving around. The idea of a wire is a joke because it doesn't work and nobody really understands it. So it's just important to understand. It's a good lesson. We talked about it in the first episode, maybe the second episode, but so bringing it back with again to the expanded audience. So,
Yeah,
anyway.
I think it's interesting because it starts with it's almost anything in this world, right? It's like fake internet money. That's how it started. And I remember this one site way back in the day where you would just go in and put in essentially the captcha that you get when you log in to test if you're not a robot. The same thing you would just put in, and it was called Bitcoin Drip or BTC Drip. And once you entered it in, you get 5 Bitcoin just into a wallet. And I think you could do it once or twice a day. And it's crazy to think about that asset now is worth $80,000 or
I
somewhere,
know.
around that, where they were just giving it away for free because to them it was a joke, even to the people who initially were interacting with it, not the people who built it primarily, but the people who interacted with it. And I think over time, the fart coins and all these other things exist, and then it slowly gets real very quickly. And from that standpoint, I think when you talk about something like a wire, that's a real world utility application for some of these things where they look at where the inefficiencies exist. And if it's something like Swift, Ripple themselves, who has a large portion of the XRP kind of ledger on lockdown, they can leverage the same application on XRP to do Swift. Now, the second question after that was, how do you essentially handle volatility for prices of these cryptos if you're sending stuff through? If I have to pay an invoice for $1 million, by the time I send it, a couple seconds later it drops. Do I have to send more to cover that million? That's where a lot of these what we call stable coins came out. And these
Right.
stable coins are going to be, US denominated, currency denominated. And they just recently passed the bill, the stablecoin bill. It's called the Genius Act, I think, in the House and Senate, which covers the use cases that the U.S. wants to upgrade its payment system because it is in such an archaic process right now. So we'll see how it heads. I think it's towards the right direction because so many operations in government is so outdated that I think it's time to look at it. This being one of them, but I think from a commercial standpoint as well, it's like retail is messing with this stuff already. Government just has
Right.
to catch up.
Yeah, it's tough to take something that to me even was born out of like a resistance. If you think like Bitcoin's like sole purpose was like, man, you know, and then now we have to embrace it as
Yeah.
like an asset class. And so there's like there's an innate resistance that you have to understand, and then a massive high value utility that you need to understand as well. So it's just like, well, what isn't a fight in life? It's just, it's hard to get everybody on board, but yeah, it does seem to be moving in the right direction.
I think one of the funniest things about the resistance on the Bitcoin side is right now they're so hopeful that governments are going to be buying into Bitcoin because Bitcoin itself, from a utility standpoint, is proven to be so slow for transfer of payment, for money. It's mostly a store of value. 'Cause that's what they call it, the gold standard for the blockchain. And so many people going from that resistance aspect of we don't need the banks and the governments now to like, we hope they buy it because we need to hold the
Yeah,
price up. It's
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
funny, but
We need a little bit of regulation.
yeah. So we're okay with regulation as well as long as it holds the price up. So
Yeah,
anyways, but
exactly.
that's the funny stuff that's happening in the space, and there's so many characters out there. So you still have to be careful, be as um skeptical as any other investment, of course, but yeah, there's so much going on in that world. So
Yeah. You know what I would say that, you never want to say too late is if you're ever going to send or receive money, practice with like two transactions under 20 cents. Because you read these horror stories because it's so easy that, money lands in the wrong place. And you hear these horror stories. However, I'll say this. I was in a very, largest bank in the world, in a high profile mortgage agency getting the mortgage for my house, and they're telling me these horror stories about how money gets moved to the wrong spot. I thought I was gonna like faint during the mortgage process. It was like nauseating. I'm like, why are you telling me this? Like, if
yeah.
anything goes wrong, it's your fault. Like, dude, like I showed up with the money and like, it's at your bank and you got to give it to that guy. Like, just make it happen. Like, oh man. So it's accidents happen, and we might hear people say that, but man, like when I did hear that like in the mortgage room. It's just like, you didn't need to tell me that. Not right now.
Yeah, of course. But speaking of outdated systems, I mean, that's another one too. I think a lot of the financial systems are going to get overhauled, but something that we're close to is in the wealth tech space as well. I mean, we bash on it being outdated. You did a great job on the last episode covering kind of, or the prior one before that, covering just tech stacks, looking across, what type of client profiles we have. We did promise everyone that I'll do one, throw some onus on me, put some homework on my side. and then do one where it's a little more institutional and enterprise level. So people who are above the levels where they can go out and build their own software, they have stuff in house, they're looking at data lakes potentially. So from that aspect, I put some stuff together. I want you to dive in with me, because you have the head in the game, you know what people are saying out there. So I'm going to go through a couple of things that I prepared just for our listeners, our billions of viewers, and we can cover some of these cases and see what it looks like, and tear it apart as much as you can.
Well, right before you do that, we didn't talk about the fitness update, and not necessarily that I wanted to, but I had the 25-pound plates on the 45-pound bar. I've upped that to the 35-pound plates at 4 sets, 10 leg raises, still doing that. But I wanted to call it out. I'm still not doing the cardio. So I feel like the more I say that, like I'll do it. I got a really cool treadmill.
It's
But I like to
accountability.
run outside. But it's still been the weather's just been terrible. That's how I sell it to myself. Although once you start running, you'll run through horrible weather. When you haven't started yet, that's a good reason to procrastinate. It's a great reason, to not do it. It's just going to slip out there or something. I got to
Yeah.
wait for a dry day to get started.
I had one of my clients who would run every morning before coming into the office. She was out in the Northeast, and I don't know the exact number, but she would say if it's 26 degrees Fahrenheit and above, I'm still running. If it's below, that's when I just don't run. And that she was so pragmatic about that. I was very impressed. And a couple of times where I stayed in the seaport area, which was close to their offices, I would just walk in the mornings when it was still kind of chilly, whatever. I would see her running, so I knew it was fact. So I was like, this is awesome. And I think, yeah, once you get into it, once you're doing it, it becomes a habit. Then it's not going to matter after that. You're just going to
Yeah,
keep
you runners,
doing it.
you're die hard because it's just like the dopamine hit's incredible. Like if you can get into the stride where you're
The
not
runner's
thinking about the
high.
end goal,
Yeah.
dude, yeah, and then that carries you through the rest of the day, makes you more resilient. You're going through something that would otherwise suck is like, yeah, whatever, man. Just get back out there the next morning, feel good again. So, yeah, I need to get back to the cardio, but. How about you though? Obviously, hitting the gym, what, 5 days a week?
Yeah, and I send you the videos.
Seven?
I don't know
I
if our
know, I
viewers
know.
are ready to see videos like that, but
Yeah.
and unbeknownst to me, so this week for our listeners was my what I call strength week. So I periodize through entire cycles of workouts, and I go a little heavy, a little lighter through the weeks. But what ends up happening is towards the end of my 16-week cycle of working out, I do a strength week, and that one is basically trying to reach your 1 rep max. So doing 1 rep, maxing it out. I obviously don't go to the so crazy where I could hurt myself, but I keep it pretty close to that
Yeah,
little
that was
cliff.
pretty rough.
But yeah, that was about 495 on the deadlift. So nothing to. I wouldn't say that's where you want to start, but it's something to aspire to. And it'll hopefully bulletproof your back. So in the future, when you are playing catch with your kids, you're not throwing out your disc or herniating anything.
Yeah, it's like when I jump up to try to touch the rim like I did not, I was like, oh my God, I feel like two ribs popped off. Like, I gotta, but yeah, so the deadlift where you just lean over. So yeah, what you just talked about, my son, he'll be like, Dad, we got max out. Like, every once in a while. So yeah, that's max out in your 700-pound clubs and all that kind of stuff. But
No, I've
yeah,
had it's crazy. It's a natural progression. It's kind of weird when I look at the kids now. Obviously, social media has kind of skewed a lot of it because they see people who are on what we call gear, steroids, who are pumping out a lot of weight. And then you see people getting injured because what ends up happening is they don't have enough time under pressure with their muscles for their tendons to get stronger. So what happens is your muscle gets stronger quicker than your tendons do, and you end up tearing a bicep, you end up tearing a pec, you end up tearing a hamstring because your tendons just aren't used to that type of weight. But if you progressively overload safely, and just how athletes do it, like Olympians and things like that, then your body is almost bulletproof to stuff like that. And that's where you want to head. Obviously, freak accidents happen in any case, but you got to be careful. But a lot of people now, like youngsters like your kid, they see it online and they're like, this guy's deadlifting 500 pounds. Like, we're going to try to do it. And not to say, shifting blame for me, I've done that when I was a kid. I would go to
yeah.
the gym and it was like, throw as many, plates as you can on there and try to bench press it. And it was like, dropping it on yourself or having people just like literally, bicep curl it for you, like, halfway getting it up, and you're like, I did it. But, realistically, you want to be true to yourself. You want to make sure you are hitting the weight unassisted, but that also means your body is ready to hit that weight. So
Right. Form is what I take away from that. Is
form
form.
over, yeah,
Another, yeah,
exactly. Form is up.
yeah.
So
So yeah, that's what that's another thing. That's another way I sell myself on lower weights. I'm like, form is important, but yeah, no. If I want to do push-ups, which I've been doing more of too, form is very important. There's no sense in doing them wrong, So,
yeah,
um,
and
but anyway,
here's
yeah.
from
Sorry, you were
me.
about to say.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, and coming from me, someone who's been doing this for a long time, like, I don't max out every week. I max out once every 16 weeks, and
Right.
it's shy of maxing out. So I know I can hit the weight. I know I can do it safely. But people, there's so many folks I see YouTube videos of, and Instagram and everything that going around. It's like maxing out every week on every lift, and it's like you're just asking to get injured. And that's why you get your rotator cuffs torn, and you get this and that and all these other stuff that just biomechanically your body's not meant to handle yet. You need to do it
Right.
so many times, repetitions, clean form. You don't want to just drop the weight on your chest and then try to push it out and say, I did the bench press. So
Yeah. So based on that, like you wouldn't max out more than 3 times a year. So like
correct.
16 weeks. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah. It's a little test to yourself, and then after that you just go back to business as usual. You up the weight slightly, but not all of them are to the red line.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I never got the insights. I was never hanging out with meatheads in college, so it's not like I just kind of had to go to the gym, and not that I'm calling you a meathead, but you have the meathead knowledge, I'm
Yeah.
sure. You'll drop a plate on a meathead's head,
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
appreciate it. No, but
but
you got to go
yeah,
through it to basically get it. And yeah, I have a nephew and his kind of group of friends who'll see me at the gym, and they always take tips from me and ask me to check their forms and whatever. And it's like that's better approach than people who are just doing whatever in the gym and then saying, I put up these plates and then they herniated this the next week, and you're like, well, that was really short lived. So
yeah,
one of the philosophers said this, and it might have been Plato or whoever, and he said, it's a shame if you don't know the potential, your physical potential. And I think that's why everyone owes it to themselves to be really good in fitness. That it's one body you have in one life, so you got to treat it really well and be as strong as you can be. And there's so much research right now coming out where people are refuting the fact that we were told cardio was the number one healthiest thing we could do, but it's really like heavy weightlifting, because the more muscle mass you have, not bodybuilder like crazy, but the more natural muscle mass your body can hold, the healthier you usually are going to be. And based on the time that you do lift weights, things like deadlift, squats, bench, your your bones themselves don't lose density. That's something called Wolff's law. And as long as there's pressure, your tendons are pulling on your bones, and it feels the need to maintain the capability to be able to and the capacity to lift weight, it's less likely that you'll lose bone density over the long term. And what's crazy is after 30, you start losing bone density. And if you start working out at
yeah.
35 or 40, you can't get back to 30. It's wherever you started. So it's, if you start early enough, you can maintain as much as you possibly can maintain from a bone density standpoint, which is going to be crucial in your older years, fragile years.
But I'm going to say it's never too late.
100%.
'Cause I got to start, but to push the potential of your physical fitness, but also this opportunity of existence.
Correct.
And what that means, when I think about like every time you work out, you're sore, and I remember saying, man, if I'm not sore, I'm lazy, and it's like the same thing with people that I talk to, entrepreneurial discussions, other sales folks. It's like, if you're not uncomfortable,
Yeah.
like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, so you've got to constantly be like, are you paying attention to what's happening in the world right now as far as like acceleration? And like, if you're sitting there comfortable with that happening and you're not participating in like becoming an expert, then I don't know. I'll say a prayer for you.
Yeah. I always say, if you think that, it's uncomfortable to do this thing and get out of your zone here, etc., put a bunch of weight on your back and try to squat out of it. Look how uncomfortable that feels. So if you do that in the gym and you can
Yeah,
fail there,
I
you
love
can
it. I
handle it
love
in
it.
life.
And it made me think that's something I do, and I live on a well. Like I don't get my water from like a utility company. Like a lot of people get their water, they're like living in. So I'm in like rural Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, man. I'm not like in the middle of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes I wish I was, but I'm like an hour outside of Philadelphia. So, but like about 12% of this country and a lot of people in rural areas, you have a well that goes into the ground, so you're siphoning the water up through like a system that I can't explain, and then you run it through like stuff, and then it gets
Yeah.
to your sink. But so that water that is as cold as like the creek, and so when or creek, depending on, but I say creek. But in the middle of the winter, something that I do and I do often, and when I get bummed out when it starts to warm up, I start my day out with a difficult decision, and that's to turn the water in the shower to cold.
Yeah.
And you can't change your breathing either. And if you're gonna do anything, you better slow it down, like Wim Hof style. Like we just
Yeah.
like and when I used to go to the gym like before the pandemic, I used to hear this guy go. I'm like, that dude, like I hear you, bro. Like, just you got the whole thing is about just staying calm. I never said that, but it's just like how to. First of all, I'm doing something I don't want to do, and I learned this from a guy, Aubrey Marcus, who I've talked to you about
Yep.
before. He started on it, like really interesting guy. But he was like, just start your day out with like something you don't want to do. That's good for you. And the thing is, like, when you start cold water and it's freezing, dude. Like when I visit my parents in Florida, and it's coming from like it's never even gets cold. I'm like, I
Yeah, it's
don't
just
even any.
lukewarm all the
Yeah,
time.
what are you kidding me? Yeah, it's like luxury. But yeah, when you make that decision to do, after I just start icing over, like after about 2 minutes, I just start laughing. So it's hard to just not like yeah. It's a great exercise, but it's you start out your day a little bit outside of your comfort zone, and then the next one sometimes you're like, oh, I gotta start talking on this big call. It's just it's like I feel like it's the same muscle, and then
Yeah.
eventually you're just like, here I am,
It's not
cold
as bad as the
water.
cold shower. Yeah, so
Yeah,
might as well.
exactly. Exactly. So just forcing yourself out of your comfort zone, I think always pays dividends. So, we went way, far off track when you were about to get into, you know, the tech stack. And what I like about the way that you think, Haik, and when you talk about ARQA, it's in the spirit of Mercedes and these high end brands. I see what you're doing is like a very elegant experience. You deliver your message, consistently and cleanly, and it's really easy for me to understand what you're doing. And I I have I'm good at building tech stacks for your typical firm. But now you see this unfolding like, okay, you're still going to be using that tech stack, but it's in an orbit of an enterprise that is supporting you, a large RIA, a large broker dealer, or a large financial institution, we'll just say. So I understand that day in the life. So I'm excited to see where you are with that. And I didn't mean to take us far off track, but
No, this is
holding
perfect.
us accountable to fitness, but went down a long
Oh, exactly.
tangent.
No, we still have to do that. So I'll actually share my screen, and it's gonna be super motivating because I'm starting out with a kicker. Own your data, So obviously this space, we've talked about the space so much and what really it means for all of us, and how we've worked with clients. So, you looked at the tech stack a couple episodes ago with what are already out in the market, what we can build. What's interesting about where we're going and what you just kind of prefaced with is you can actually start building your own, not only tech stack, but your own data lake, your own enterprise system, and essentially have systems that are out there today built around it to ensure that you're getting everything you need. And it's only recently that we can do something like this. And the reason is because when you think about the landscape today, or up until this point, what it's been is super fragmented. A lot of the data that's coming into the systems are coming from a different custodian who's sending data differently. It's coming through a PDF that someone's manually entering. There's a lot of stuff related to real-time data when you're thinking of alts that's always lagging based on what the bottleneck is and getting that data in there. So it's very difficult, especially with market changes. Like, there are big systems out there that are still T+1 and they don't have real-time pricing. So when you look at the market we just recently had between the tariffs, the prices looked very different yesterday than they do today. And if you're a manager, an advisor logging in, and you have your your favorite client portal that's based off of these numbers, and someone's logging in and seeing everything look like, hey, my portfolio is doing well, but the markets are all red. Is this, let me call in. You start having to screen these calls and saying like, is this really happening? And a lot of it's not true. And once they have that level of doubt, whether it's a client and advisor looking at that data, and it's like, this isn't really what's going on in the market. What ends up happening is the entire system breaks down. And the reason for that is because this has been enough. When you think about the more legacy systems out there, it's been enough for these people, but now it's changing. There's more demand. It's like, I can open up my phone and see the prices change. Why can't I see it in this enterprise software I'm paying money for to do the same thing for me, for my clients, etc.? So a lot of the fintech landscape and what WealthTech has done is, I think they've gotten a little too comfortable. When we spoke about comfort, they got too comfortable with the clients being okay with their systems. And where this really took a change is tech started becoming better. And with better tech, there's higher expectations of you doing a better job at, expressing what's really going on in the portfolios. So what has been leading up to this point and where the landscape has been is the SaaS model. Every solution out of there has been using what we call software as a service. And really, where we're going next with the technology that's available, and with ARQA specifically, it's being AI native. What this means is, in the SaaS model, you had to change the data to fit the business logic, and everything was hard coded into your system. So if you were going into a Black Diamond, an Adipar, an SS&C's, Axis, whatever it would be, APX, everything, you had to fit your data into how they did stuff for you to get the output correct. And you really were changing your data. So whatever from a raw data standpoint you were looking at, everything would change once it hit the system, because they needed to reconcile a certain way, or they needed the price to show up a certain way, or classically you needed to unitize your investment for you to see any performance on it, when really it was just a one lump sum investment you made into a private equity firm. So a lot of these things had to change. Where the AI native platforms come in, and where this becomes much more interesting, is that you really don't need to take the business logic and put it on the data itself or embed it in there. You can have the business logic sit around in these agentic AIs that work with the data the way it is. So as long as you really have a clean database, what you're really doing is you're letting different AIs essentially do operations on that data. You can own all that data. And as you can see, you can actually interact with that data using natural language. So very popularly, I think a couple of months ago, Microsoft's CEO, he said, where I think a lot of these AIs are coming into play is that all these SaaS companies essentially become a CRUD database, and you're going to have these AIs who are not going to care where the data is coming from, but they're going to know the business logic is living with them of what to do with that data. And then you're going to have to get rid of the CRUD because it doesn't matter. It's just a database at the end of the way. So what's going to happen is you're going to have these advisors, and how this matters for WealthTech is you'll have advisors who can really own their data, whether they use something out of the box like an event mile marker or something else, or they just go to AWS and build their own data set. They would have the capabilities to own it all, house it, and then start leveraging AI to actually do reporting, downstream analytics, client portals, anything along those lines. And that's where ARCA has seen kind of the biggest leverage for something like this and the opportunity. And realistically, here's the product of suites. I'm going to actually talk about this is this is an extensive list because we do so much more, but I'm going to
Can I
use,
ask one question real
yeah,
quick?
of course.
Um, when you talk about something that you just said that I was curious about, let's say I have a bucket of all of my performance reporting history and the transactional data, month end, rate of return, the whole shebang.
Yes.
And I put that file into, I give that bucket to you. Can you run performance metrics on that data at a client or household
Yeah,
or
of
account
course.
level? Okay. Yeah.
So
Okay.
and that's the level of data. And I'm going to go through, I'm going to use these as my kind of triggers for what I'm going to show you in a second, and then dissect each of these and what they mean for the larger ecosystem. But jump in, and this will make a lot more sense once I show you this. So
Okay, great.
basically, using and this one we've shown before on the podcast, but we're gonna dig a level deeper. We're gonna double click on each of these segments that
Well,
really
I'm
feed.
glad we're revisiting this.
Yeah,
I remember jumping off of it before, right?
Yeah, so something you mentioned is, if I have the raw data coming in, if it's coming in through custodian, it's coming in through an external data source from different places, what the benefit of having an AI native ecosystem and what this looks like for you is your data will be sitting in the middle of all of this, whether it's a data lake, whether it's an enterprise system you've built, and we can leverage the AI from different aspects to essentially feed what this is going to look like. So for the example of the import engine or even core script where you're going to get a lot of that data, this is what's going to happen. You're going to take a lot of the data that's coming from PDFs. You're going to have to manually do the entry for it. It's going to be stuck in some box somewhere that is getting delivered to, or some portal. The AI is able to actually go out, get that data, bring it in, read it for you. So you don't need to have an OCR. You don't have to have templates. It actually reads the document end to end. It puts all that data in. The import engine itself is going to be for the custodial data feeds, for things that are a little more automated, that are coming day to day. So it could be your positions, your tax lots, your transactions, the things you just mentioned. And it could be historical as well. So we can run the import engine based on historical as well as current things that are coming in, compiling, and then reconcile that data. So where the real data ingestion's value is between, leveraging both the import engine and core script is that there is going to be, right now, there used to be maybe a couple of different ways you used to get your SFTP files from Schwab and Fidelity and all this stuff. But now we have APIs. The custodians are delivering in SFTPs. They could be delivering with other custom integrations. So instead of you running around and trying to figure out how that works, the AI is able to actually take that data, normalize it, reconcile your holdings, transactions, tax lots, prices over that entire historical period, as well as anything that's going in live. And then from that normalization, say, here's a clean data set I just brought for you, and it's in the way that you expect it to see. Now that's your data. Hold on to it, because I've done all the heavy lifting, taking it from the raw file into what it needs to look like for you to say, I have this basis of a data lake of all my transactions, holdings, history, positions, etc., and all the prices associated to it. So if you do go downstream and report on it, or you want to make some visualizations or dashboards, you know the data is good. And then from the core script side, obviously, realistically, there's humans have been doing this operation since I've been in this business. And I think AI is able to leverage statements, scanned documents, things like that, that people are getting. Because as an advisor, as an operating firm, you don't know what you're going to get from clients a lot of times. And whether this investment was made as a legacy, they have a scanned document that's sitting somewhere. They're going to give you the physical document maybe, and you got to enter it in somehow. When you're doing a lot of this stuff, you're able to use something like our ARQA core script to process it, to get it structured essentially into the system. And more recently, we've even tested this out for like trust documents and things like that. And what if a trust document has subtrusts and it has amendments and all this stuff? This is where the model you landed, and then you expand it to all these different use cases and become super interesting in how you can get the data out. So I'll pause right there from the data ingestion, George, if you have any questions on that part. I know that's always a sticking point.
Yeah, go, if you could go to the next slide so I could talk through what I think I heard. So if
This one?
yeah,
Yep.
that one right there. So financial documents on the far right, moving left into ARCA core script. Like so, and we you say financial documents, but is that like it sounds like that's like a restrictive word because like that could be pretty much anything and core script could interpret it. Here's where I'm thinking is if I have my email history,
Yep.
my email archive history is a PST file, 20 years worth, and I dump it into a bucket. Number one, now this is getting into compliance. Once we dump it into that bucket, anyway, it could be in worm format compliant with SEC Rule 17A4F, kind of, and any other documents that might be attached to files in the PST, all that kind of stuff. And then can I isolate it by an advisor or, well, actually, it probably is isolated by advisor buckets, maybe in the way
Yeah.
I'm playing it out. And then search for words like, did the advisor use the word guarantee? What was the activity between these two folks? You know, so can you consume data like that, and then can you create that vault, that compliant vault on the inside as well? I know it's a lot, but I know that firms, supervision is like, if you don't supervise, you get fined. So you've got to supervise to make sure that like people aren't out of compliance.
Yeah,
So
that's so financial docs is definitely restrictive in the sense of what we talk about here, but it's not restrictive in the real world for core script. So, like I said, we've taken investment documents, we've taken trusts, we've taken insurance commission statements, pretty much anything. So, if you do get it in a format that core script can read, which is PDF, TIFF, XML, whatever you want to kind of give it, you'd be able to actually provide it into core script and have everything you just said from a capability standpoint partitioned out so you can say, hey, I want to see these things and these factors and who was talking to this client between this period. So all of that's possible leveraging already stuff that's built. Imagine this is the chassis of the vehicle and you're slowly putting all the accessories on and you're like, can you do this document type? Can you get this type of data out of here? That's where core script really comes into. The import engine on the left side, though, is mostly for that repetitive data feed itself. So it's primarily
yeah,
different. Yeah.
totally. That is what we think about when we connect to our custodians. I'm just thinking like if I'm compliance in the back of the room and like nobody ever listens to me, I'm like, hey, got this email nightmare I'm dealing with. Any chance we can just throw that in here too?
Yeah.
So that's why supervision and it's just at the top of mind for a lot of people who aren't heard. And I've had an email archive as a compliance solution as a it was inside of a CRM that we built, Grendel. But so that question came up a lot. So I know there's like it's a massive email archive, email supervision is massive in our space. So
Yeah.
can't
No,
use
it's
words like guarantee.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, once that data is in there, though, what do you really do with it, right? So we call it security master right now as a next step, but realistically, it's a data master. It can be a master and the record of data across your entities as well. So security master is again a little restrictive of what it's possible to do because the AI and the agentic AI and how it understands the logic is that it can say, well, I want to do a different variations of Adam Smith I saw, and it says Adam Smith, Adam A. Smith. This is the same person or not. So it can verify a lot of that. So for us, once data is in the system, we can literally take external data sources, we can take the data that's already in there and essentially make it more robust, add more data layers to it. So whether it's coming through, in this example, we have NASDAQ, or it could be Morningstar, it could be some pricing data, Bloomberg, whatever it is, we can take and append a much larger data lake itself that's clean and you have the data integrity. And realistically, that's the biggest piece. If I get a custodian data set that's coming in through multiple feeds and I have Apple where one QSIP is missing, one ticker is missing, etc., I have 5 different apples that are showing up in my system when I go to look at who owns Apple or who's exposed to Apple due to the new China tariff. So a lot of these things are going to start mattering once you realize your data is messy. And that's where realistically the ARQA security master comes in because it helps you, one, aggregate all that data together, normalize it from multiple sources, resolves any duplicates, enriches the data with anything that's outside of your own data set. Because by means you don't own everything under the sun, but we can go out and get NASDAQ data, Bloomberg data, everything, and then actually plug in missing data. So if you have missing prices because you were on a system that wasn't providing you with that, or you guys were entering in month ends and then you just have transactions, well, I can put in the missing data in between with my security master to give you TWR performance historically daily and then moving forward. So it looks like you've always been with leveraging ARCA's ecosystem from the get-go. And then this way you maintain a clean and continuous updated repository for all your data. And I think a lot of folks who aren't on the operational side from the data perspective, this might not resonate as much until I always say like shit hits the fan. And then you're like, well, I can't even report on this one holding. I had a client the other day say, I just want to ask ARCA, like, who owns Tesla? And it's like, well, if you don't have a clean data set, I always call it out, that's not going to work. But if you do, then there's nothing stopping you from asking queries like that for quick insights or any research. So the security master, I think it's an overlooked part of all this. But what's interesting is that a lot of the things I'm showing here are things that potentially exist in other systems or don't, but you almost have to recreate that same functionality with the agentic AI. So if you go out on your own and you're building your own data lake, you're building your own ecosystem, etc., these are the things you have to take into consideration because if you haven't already built this itself within the system, like the SaaS model, where you have to kind of maintain the business logic. You're changing the data to fit this, and you're saying, hey, for the security master on the SaaS, let's merge these two or delete this security or do this. You're essentially messing with your own data set. And then if historically you got to go back and say, well, that wasn't correct, we did something wrong, good luck. You deleted like a data entry that was supposed to be there. So with the security master itself, it's that gap between all the stuff that exists and you see to how you want it to look, and here's the final product of my data lake itself. And I know, George, you've probably been in these conversations for many years. I think data lakes have the security master issue a lot. I know from BlackRock's Aladdin product, like they have 400, no, it's 1,400 almost data entries per security, just maintaining this large data set, which they have to manually do overnight. But any questions about that for us, or what do you think the importance of it is?
I think the important thing is that you call it out as as loudly as you do, because the security master is a big part of the discussion to the few people that it matter to. To everybody else, it kind of assumes that this magic happens. So I don't have any questions on it. It's awesome that you do it, and I think it's under considered when you're deciding to take on your own data lake,
Yeah.
and to surface data from the data lake accurately, that a way that makes sense to anyone who logs in.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah, it's awesome. Yeah.
and then this again, you can build so many agents around this data set. And this is just us covering it within, an hour podcast. So it's, I made it very pointed in different ways I do it. But here's my favorite one, the fun one, the actual AI component. So one thing I want to call out is we leverage AI across all the modules and microservices that we have. Obviously, core script that leverages AI to read the documents. Our import engine's leveraging AI to essentially create like any type of placeholder transactions that are missing when it's reconciling, getting data from different places for pricing, for units, etc. But what we call ARQA AI itself is the interaction between the advisor and that data. So if you want to ask natural language questions around that data, who's holding Tesla, who's exposed to France and China and the tariffs, etc., all these things really come into this box right here. And this one's the best one in my opinion because it's so new. It's such a shiny toy for folks. They're just getting into the chat GPTs, the deep seeks, the perplexities out there. But what we've been able to do is leverage cutting edge AI, place that on your system in the way that you can interact with it. So you can ask stuff like, what changes happened in this portfolio over the last quarter? Or, George just called me. I need to give him an update since the last time we met. What can I talk about? So a lot of this stuff becomes super interesting once you have the AI component built on top of your data, whether it's an enterprise system that has APIs exposed that we can pull on, or it's direct access to that data, or it's a data lake. A lot of those things that you're indexing already within it, the AI can learn what that looks like and then have that categorization process done. So anytime you ask questions, it's able to easily answer them. So one of the three things
If
that,
I could just right there
of
say
course,
one thing, if you're having a, so what I heard there is, I love to bring it into real life use cases. If you're an advisor and your day sucks, and you have a meeting with your client coming up that you don't want to do, and you don't have anything to talk about, because everything's so damn obvious to you, you can ask the AI about some conversational points about this portfolio,
correct.
that might make that meeting a lot easier for you as an advisor. Is that
Correct. Yeah,
correct?
and you can specify with, recent economic indicators that were released with news or whatever, so it's more relevant to the client once they're there. They're also like entrenched in the conversation. So the three things we're pushing forward with the AI now that's there, it's actually limitless because I'll talk about some other use cases we've gotten into with some enterprise clients as well. But one of the things is domain knowledge, right? So once you do have that data set, what if I have things that I do within my own firm? And I want the AI to know about it. So for us, when we looked at the AI component in WealthTech, we said, well, the biggest data set that our clients are working with is the portfolio data that's coming in, and they're running around and trying to do the reports and know what to talk about. They get that ad hoc call, etc. So why don't we allow them to do quick insights? Quick insights is going to let you ask questions with the portfolio that's there without you having to build any filters and views and things like that, or dashboards to get to the answer. And coming from Invent, you know the value of that. Each thing being a widget, it's so much easier that instead of creating a widget, because I don't know what the question may be or what I care about at that minute, I just want to ask and get the data out very quickly. So our micro app does that there. Now, once that's there, then, what if I have some standard procedure docs that I want the firm, if they're asking questions about, to respond, the AI to respond to them in this way? So what if you want to change beneficiaries in Schwab? What if you want to update a record, etc.? So we can take these documents in their PDF format, or even links, or even videos that you're using for training, and have it transcribed and fed into ARQA AI. So you can go in there and ask questions like, hey, how would X firm do this change? Or what if I got a call from a client, they passed away, there's no next of kin, what do I do next? And then it can go through those docs, sift through thousands of pages and say, here's what you should do, here are the next steps, and realistically direct you into operation as you would like. From there, then we're doing what we call discovery. This is more on the research side, taking data that's outside in the real world, merging it with your portfolio data essentially, or essentially cross-referencing it, so you can then get a response back that's not only just siphoned to your portfolio, but it's also saying, here's what the data I see from your portfolio, and here's everything else that can affect it that I'm getting outside, whether it's news, whether it's things that are released through NASDAQ, indicators, and etc. Then the final thing is actually the tasks and workflows themselves. So that's one that gets super interesting, because now we can leverage the AI to do a lot of the operations for you within your system, within your tech stack, or build a new kind of operation that you're not even thinking about. So one of those things is like client onboarding. Here's the process. I gave you the domain knowledge of how to onboard a client. Now go and do it for me and actually trigger it. Or if I do see a lot of accounts that just had a deposit of cash, can I go ahead and invest in it? So like show me which ones they are and then what I should put them into as far as a model portfolio. What are they the closest to? So give me a proposal I can present. So things like this become super exciting, because if you look back at how we think about AI and wealth tech, it's let's identify the value add cases for you initially. Let's learn what those value add cases are, and then let's actually do them for you. So then you can think of more different ways to add value to your clients and your firm and your life by not having to be in front of the computer.
And it's so fast. I mean,
Yeah. So it gets really interesting. But
yeah, that's really cool.
yeah, so the overall benefits of doing something like this, I mean, again, I'm using our product suite to kind of call out, because there are people who do like the note taking, and if that's going to be one thing you're going to add in your operation and the CRM side of it, that's great. You can go do that. You can do some stuff with reporting. You want to push out stuff into something like a Jiffy and do the reporting, or client portal. You can kind of build what you want from the ecosystem. But realistically, where we see this is each of those things and operations are almost agents that live around the ecosystem themselves. So technically, if you were to go out and do this, the value prop that you're going to be receiving, I think, is miles beyond what you're going to be receiving with kind of out of the box or off the shelf products. And that's where you can build your own strategic insights and however you look at your data and whatever data set you want to bring in. You have the efficiencies of automating all the entries of that data. You're looking at the data quality that you sit on. If anyone says, hey, we need this report of who owns this or who's turning 50 in Texas, whatever, you have the data, you're sitting there. You don't have to run around red tail and be like, did someone update this? We know there's a rule that we already did because the AI is monitoring for it. And then obviously you're future proofing your entire firm. So realistically, wherever you go with this, at some time, you're going to be big enough where you're going to want to own your data. You're going to want to sell the firm. You're going to want to, get tucked in, whatever it is. You're future proofing all your capabilities, because whether you're the acquirer and you want to grow and build a big business around it, you're going to enable every other firm you're bringing in to be able to do the same exact things that you are. Or if you are going out to another firm, you're going to be able to easily transfer that data over to them and make this much more easy migration than you would expect, which makes your valuation higher. So
You talk about democratizing the data, and I just want to touch on something we talked about before, which is so a firm with a data lake is a more valuable firm.
yeah,
So now I imagine a firm with a data lake and ARCA running on it. If I'm an aggregator or whatever, if I'm the owner of the firm, you want it to be as valuable as possible, running it as efficiently as possible. Okay, put that aside. Now, if I'm an aggregator looking at you and I want to buy you, it's you, and there's other firms I'm thinking about buying too. I didn't just zero in on you. It never works that way. So they're just, but if they see that data lake, they own their data. I don't have to go through all the transition. I mean, whatever. It makes the migration really easy. So when you have that data and you own your own data lake, you are a more valuable firm. You're more attractive because just imagine if you were the one that wanted to buy something like so that the practice runs great, and then the technology uses is outsourced. Okay. And then, what's the like risk mitigation strategies on the outsourced data? Like you've got to go down a different rabbit hole on having otherwise contained your data, owned the data, curated your data, and then you're demonstrating the expertise of doing that and then surfacing the data. So,
Correct. Yeah,
man, it's amazing.
and all of these things can be agents to do that, right? So it's like one of my favorite kind of parts of my job is someone comes to me with a problem. They say we're onboarding an advisor or we're onboarding clients. And I go and I say, well, these are the two things that are similar in that process. So why don't we create that as a scalable part of the process? Here's the differences in that process where you're onboarding an advisor, you're taking this book, and you're onboarding a client, you're taking this data set. So that's going to be slightly different. But guess what? When you're doing proposal generation for prospects, it looks very similar to this client side of what data you're getting. So I can, recreate that one. So what ARQA really provides and brings to the table is that the firms who want to own their data, they want to democratize themselves away from the SaaS model, the outdated SaaS model. They don't have to go and build everything from scratch. You don't need to hire someone who's going to sit there and say, well, here's the how AI works, and here's our limitations of what we can do, etc. We can come in there and say, here's the chassis that's already built out. And each of these things from an agentic standpoint can be a part of the software, part of the process in this way. And then here's the stuff that's going to be different that we got to just develop on top of it. But guess what? Here's the efficiencies you're going to gain by doing so. That model, what's interesting to me is resonating a lot more with enterprises, and to no surprise, because I think when you're talking about it, it's a big uptaking, but it's becoming very interesting because they have the problem already. They have the data. They're sitting on it and saying, I just need someone to merge the two together. And so for us, that's where it's been a real big, interesting indicator in the market of the appetite for wealth tech and AI. And I think it's gaining a lot of steam. But I always call back to our first T3 that we were at, where we were talking about, AI just like this. It wasn't quite as built out from the ecosystem. I would say it was more for our own platform for the advisors, and they were just dumbfounded. It was like, what are you even talking about? But at this point, I'm getting a lot of inbound stuff, questions from calls and things like that, where they're like, I just want to ask a question and get a response. And I'm like, this is what we've been saying for the last year or so, of here's how you need to interact with your data. That's where your data is actually valuable. One thing I'll mention before I shut out of this one is, a lot of folks like to talk about data being the new commodity, right? And they say data is a new commodity, it's a new oil. And I just recently heard this on a podcast from the Palantir CTO as well. So I'm rephrasing a little of what he said because it resonated with me and it's something I've believed in for a while. Data itself doesn't really mean much. It's how you use it that it becomes valuable. So if you're calling, data the new oil, I think it's mostly, and this is his words, he says it's mostly snake oil, because you can aggregate all this data and sit on it and not do anything with it, and it's worthless. It's just a bunch of data points you have. It's only valuable when you can leverage it to know what the next step is, or you can leverage it to go and acquire more businesses or more clients. So this, I think, is not only democratizing your data, but it's actually creating usefulness to the data that you're already sitting on, because just sitting on the data alone isn't going to get you there.
Right. So many things I could say about that. But one of the things I wanted to is when you talk about firms being data driven, and when we just talk about the excitement of using AI all the times, like in our personal lives and all that kind of stuff. Most firms in the wealth management space are so boring to work for. And like you go in and you're like, you do demos and they're boring. They're just like a bank. They're like every other company. And we're in a world that is evolving to become a more efficient, exciting place. And we're in a world that is like really volatile. And dude, it's not going to go away. You're just going to be learning to be more peaceful during volatility. Like that's how you're going to survive, or you're not. And if you're in a firm in the wealth management space, or really anywhere on earth, um, imagine you have people that are stressed about what's happening in the world, and we don't talk about that. But imagine if you can bring in AI, not to scare anybody away from AI. It's like you said, it's not the data that's valuable, it's your relationship with the data. And
Correct.
that's everything in life. People, well, might somebody say alcohol is bad. It's like, alcohol is not bad. Alcohol is sitting on a shelf. Sounds like your relationship with alcohol is bad, and understandably so. A lot of people have it. So you have to um, have a relationship with your data and make it fun, and let your employees know you're onto the hippest, coolest way of embracing data, like Haik ARQA style, because you're fun, like the way you think about it. And when you work in a firm like that, imagine you walk around with people and they're having conversations instead of being stressed out at your desk. Yo, what's up? I just got two AI agents doing that presentation, man. I got to do that thing on stage next week. It just makes life better. Like work was fun 15 years ago. And not saying that it's not, but it's not as fun. It's more stressful because the world is more stressful. But you've got to, again, going back to just staying stoic, having a wonderful relationship with your data, democratizing it, leveraging solutions like ARCA to create something cool for the firm and downstream to the clients who are paying for everything anyway. So, you know, so yeah, give them a good experience too. Like you said, their expectations are today, like up to right now, you
Yeah.
know? So
No,
it
speaking of that point you made, I got these two agents doing this stuff. The other day we had someone who sent us a link for like some form for submission of like AI companies and whatever. And I those things are, I always mess with them and I say it's like a pay to play thing and all this stuff. But just for fun, I put it into Operator in ChatGPT and I said, go out to this form, make 3 submissions for ARCA and do this and come up with a custom text each time for why they should pick us. And it did it, and it's fun, and I like doing stuff like that. And that's what I completely agree. That's what the wealth tech industry should be like. We
you
should.
spend about a minute of time on that, or under 5 minutes, versus like going back and forth, like kind of this stupid thing I got to participate
Yeah,
in.
and I didn't even have to
You
do
know,
it, but just for fun, I did it, and I wanted to leverage the most recent tech out there, and I sent it to a couple of people of what I was doing, and they're like, I didn't even see this, and I didn't know it could work, and this that, and I was like, this is what we do, and
you're
for
empowered. You're more empowered. You're
correct,
empowered to do more. It's not less. It's not to, it's to embrace it, to have a good relationship with it, and deploy it with somebody that knows what they're doing, so that the relationship works out.
exactly.
So
And I think
yeah,
the right partners in the right places make all the difference. And there's going to be leaders who pop out within this entire revolution of AI within wealth tech who will pick and run with it. And then there'll be people who will be left behind naturally. And so I think that's why we like to be with a fun crew. We like to do the fun stuff and we like to break stuff, right? It's like break quick and then we fix it and we figure out what's going on. But that's just how we build internally. And then we go out to the market and we've already someone comes to us and says, here's the problem I have, and I'm like, we already did this, like, and this was fun for us, because we knew someone out there will have this issue. It's just you didn't know you could probably build it with ARCA or AI or anything else, but we have the secret sauce, we have the juice.
yeah, and you know what? You just made me think when we were texting kind of like midweek, we always talk about firms like what isn't working, right?
Yeah.
And just to be, we talk about like making it a better place to work. So it's not like what isn't working, man. Where do you want to be? So there's like both of these things have to be considered. Like what do you want to be when you grow up? Like so you've got to start today. The sooner you get started, the better. So
Yeah.
think
And, and
about it.
and so many people get stuck on that, right? It's like, let's over engineer everything. And it's like, just start. Once you start, everything else will make sense. And sometimes you know what? Here's the car and you're going down the racetrack and you're building the components to it's rolling slowly, but you're putting the components together. And by the time you get to the finish line, now you're going full speed. And I think that's one of the things that
Yeah, you just broke down agile right there.
exactly.
There you go. Yeah, and like and I didn't want to cut you off, but like, yeah, it's important to just get out there and suck. You got
Yeah.
to start. You're not
Yeah.
going to start awesome. Don't start with your largest prospect. But like, you got to just start whatever it is you want to do in life. You got to just start.
Yeah. Well, depending, as you said, depending on your relationship with the largest prospect, maybe you do start there. But yeah,
Exactly. Right. It's about relationship management.
that's it.
That is it. Wealth management is relationship management. It's it's a lot of things. So I'll change what wealth management is and means to me every week. But that's what wealth management is. It's really dynamic, and if you don't get it, get out.
Love it.
Oh,
Well,
well, it's
well,
always great to talk to you, man. And
I was
I'm
I
glad
was,
we
I
could
was
catch
thinking in
up.
my head before we signed off. I'm like, should I show the deadlift video and we just sign off, or? But it's too much. We'll leave the progress videos for another time where we start going into the
I'm
fitness.
okay with it. I'm okay with it. It's impressive stuff. I'm going to show it to my son. Haven't had a chance yet, but yeah, it's motivating me. I still have to lift today.
Same here.
Plenty,
I got to
plenty
get
of
out
hours left.
today. Yeah, I got shoulders today, so in the middle of my 5 day cycle, and I try to just get out whenever I can because with schedules the way they are with travel, it's like I used to be a stickler that I just start Mondays, and then you realize because you miss a Monday and you're like, oh, I'll just do it next week. It's the worst thing. So
Yeah,
you got to
Mondays are
do it when
meaningless.
you
Yeah,
can.
yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Right?
It's a full, yeah, it's just a revolving cycle of 5 days with 1 or 2 rest days in between. Doesn't matter what day of the week it is. Done. Figure it
Yeah,
out.
you're waiting for a day. Like, just do it now. Just start right now. Right now. Right now.
I love it. All right. Well, George, thank you so much for joining me on episode 6. This was really fun. Thanks for giving me the floor to go through the ecosystem play and kind of use ARQA as the placeholder for what people can do out there. But I think we're onto a very exciting age in wealth tech right now. So would love to, as George, you always say, tell us where we're wrong when once this is out there in the real world. So would love to hear from folks who have issues with what we're presenting, and then we'll handle those cases on the next ones.
Love it, man.
Awesome. I appreciate the time, George. Have a good one.
All right, man. Talk to you.
Bye.